The clinking of silverware against ceramic usually soothed Eleanor, but tonight, the sound felt like tiny hammers chipping away at her composure. Across the polished mahogany, Charlotte's subtle gleam of triumph was unmistakable as Mother cleared her throat. "Darling, it's decided. Charlotte needs your room, and the attic space is perfectly adequate for you." Father, without looking up from his plate, added, "It's for the best, Eleanor." A cold calm settled over her then, eclipsing the hurt, as she met their gaze and stated plainly, "No. I'll be out by the end of the week, but not into the attic." Silence descended upon the dinner table, thicker than the expensive gravy Charlotte had slathered over her untouched potatoes. Sarah's hand, mid-reach for the wineglass, froze, her eyes wide with a fragile mix of disbelief and hurt. Richard, ever the patriarch, bristled, his face reddening. "Eleanor," he began, his voice laced with the patronizing authority she'd grown to loathe, "that's a rash decision. You're being emotional. We're offering you a solution." Eleanor didn't flinch. The word solution tasted like ash in her mouth. She was the family solution, always. The one who quietly paid for the rising property taxes, who handled the increasingly complex finances, whose steady pharmaceutical salary propped up Charlotte's endless string of passion projects that never generated a dime. Her contributions, substantial and consistent, were always invisible until they needed her. Now, her spacious room, the only true sanctuary she'd ever known in that house, was being offered up as a sacrifice on the altar of Charlotte's latest whim, a wellness studio in the garage, which necessitated more space for her creative flow. Charlotte, whose gleam of triumph had momentarily vanished at Eleanor's declaration, now piped up, her voice a saccharine wine. "Ellie, don't be silly. The attic is cozy. We just want you to be happy. Don't make things difficult." Her eyes, however, held a predatory glint that Eleanor recognized all too well, the satisfaction of having finally pushed her sister out. Eleanor merely pushed her chair back, the scrape a sharp counterpoint to the family's bickering. "Difficult?" she echoed softly, the word a deadly whisper. "No, Charlotte. I'm making things simple." She rose, her movements precise, unhurried. There were no raised voices, no tears, no dramatic exit. That was Charlotte's territory. Eleanor's anger was a colder, more enduring thing. It was molten steel, hardening into an impenetrable resolve. She walked to the kitchen, stacked her plate and utensils, and placed them quietly in the sink. Her parents watched her, confused by the lack of outburst, unsettled by her absolute calm. They expected tears, arguments, a desperate plea to reconsider. What they got was chilling indifference. "I won't be returning," Eleanor stated, her back still to them, rinsing her hands methodically. "So you won't need to worry about my room, or the attic, or any other solutions you might devise." She didn't wait for their stammered responses. She walked directly to her room, the spacious one overlooking the manicured backyard, the room she'd earned, paid for, and maintained. Inside, she methodically began to pack a single suitcase, not with clothes, but with her most essential documents, her emergency cash, her laptop, and a few cherished photographs of herself alone, from before this family had ever begun to chip away at her. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from Charlotte, ranging from fake concern, "Are you really leaving?" "Don't be dramatic," to thinly veiled threats, "Mom and Dad are really upset, Eleanor. You'll regret this." Then calls from her parents, their voices escalating from feigned worry to outright indignation. She silenced them all, blocking their numbers one by one, watching their names vanish from her screen with a detached sense of finality. They had made their choice, now she would make hers. As she zipped the suitcase, the image of a grand, elegant house solidified in her mind, the stately Westlake Hills mansion her parents had often pointed out on their Sunday drives, sighing about how it was the dream, a symbol of unattainable aspiration. They had always treated her like an expense, a burden, a less-than daughter. They had given her an ultimatum, and in doing so, had freed her. Her initial thought wasn't of finding just a place, but the place. Not survival, not merely independence, but a victory so absolute it would rewrite their entire family history. This wasn't just about moving out, it was about building an empire, brick by bitter brick, until she could acquire the very symbol of their unfulfilled desires, not for them, but for herself. A cold smile touched her lips. Their dream home. Her new objective. Eleanor wasted no time. The chill in her voice at dinner had been a promise, not a threat, and she was a woman who kept her promises, especially to herself. The very next morning, she was hunched over her laptop, her formidable intelligence now weaponized against a complacent family. Her substantial savings, meticulously built over years while her parents casually dismissed her contributions, were her first line of attack. Paired with an impeccable credit score, a testament to her disciplined financial habits, she possessed a quiet but potent arsenal. Her initial research wasn't for a starter home, but for a comprehensive understanding of Austin's booming real estate market and, more specifically, the elusive Westlake Hills mansion her parents had often wistfully, almost possessively, spoken of as their ultimate dream. It was a distant star, but she charted its course, even as she prepared to embark on a more immediate journey. Within a week, Austin's vibrant housing market began to bend to her will. Her pharmaceutical job, once the primary focus, now felt like a mere means to an end, a steady income stream fueling a much grander ambition. She secured a pre-approved loan with a speed and efficiency that surprised even the seasoned loan officer, her financial acumen undeniable. Her target, however, wasn't a pristine, move-in-ready abode. Instead, she zeroed in on a rundown townhouse in a burgeoning neighborhood, a property significantly below market value, its potential obscured by neglect. It was a diamond in the rough, much like Eleanor herself had been in her family's eyes, waiting to be polished. The closing was swift, her movements precise and devoid of sentimentality. The moment the keys were in her hand, a profound sense of liberation washed over her. This small, decrepit space was hers, truly and unequivocally. The renovations became her new obsession, a grueling, physical manifestation of her psychological rebirth. She devoured online tutorials, spent evenings poring over architectural plans, and weekends covered in sawdust and paint. Learning to lay flooring, install fixtures, and even basic plumbing wasn't just about saving money, it was about reclaiming capability, proving to herself, brick by brick, that she could build a world entirely of her own design. Every nail driven, every wall painted, was a defiant assertion against the notion that she was only as valuable as her parents deemed her to be. The incessant buzzing of her phone, a barrage of calls and texts from Sarah and Richard, then Charlotte, was easily silenced. She blocked their numbers without a flicker of hesitation. Charlotte's messages, initially feigning concern, quickly devolved into thinly veiled attempts at guilt-tripping. "Mom's worried sick, Eleanor. We just want you to be happy," followed by, "It's not fair. You just abandoned us." Each notification, unseen and unheard, only solidified Eleanor's resolve. Their distressed pleas were nothing more than a desperate attempt to reassert control, to pull her back into the narrative they had so cruelly crafted for her. She refused to be entangled in their emotional web. Her focus was absolute, laser-sharp on her burgeoning independence. Then came the sales bonus from her pharmaceutical job, a substantial sum that arrived like a strategic reinforcement. Her relentless work ethic, once directed towards an unappreciative family, now served her own empire. This windfall, combined with her shrewd management of renovation costs, provided the additional capital needed to accelerate her projects, cementing her belief that hard work, when channeled correctly, yielded undeniable power. Each dollar earned, each property acquired, was a stone laid in the foundation of her unassailable autonomy, a silent, powerful retort to every dismissive glance and belittling word. She wasn't just building houses, she was fortifying her own impenetrable fortress. The townhouse, meticulously revitalized with Eleanor's sweat and strategic foresight, sold in a swift, decisive transaction, fetching a profit that made her initial investment seem almost quaint. The numbers flashed across her screen, not just monetary gain, but a validation, a powerful hum of affirmation that resonated deep within her. Her instincts, honed by years of quiet observation and an inherent understanding of market dynamics, were not merely good, they were exceptional. The feeling wasn't triumph in the conventional sense, but a chilling satisfaction, a confirmation that her path was not just viable, but inevitable. She allowed herself a single, sharp exhale, a fleeting acknowledgement of the undeniable shift in her trajectory. There was no time for lingering sentiment. The capital was immediately redeployed. Her next target was a foreclosed property, a dilapidated relic of someone else's misfortune. She approached it with the same surgical precision, stripping away the decay to reveal its inherent value. Days bled into nights, spent poring over blueprints, negotiating with contractors, and, often, with a surprising knack for practical skills, tackling minor repairs herself. The second flip yielded an even more impressive return, the profits compounding at a rate that would have made most seasoned investors envious. Each successful deal was a meticulously placed brick in her burgeoning empire. Each dollar earned a declaration of independence that echoed louder than any shouted defiance. The initial unrealistic timeline critics had noted now manifested as an almost supernatural drive, transforming perceived weakness into an undeniable, terrifying strength. The momentum was unstoppable. She didn't just stop at flipping. Eleanor diversified, strategically acquiring a cluster of properties for rental income. She established Vance Holdings LLC, a legal shield and a formal declaration of her arrival as a serious player in Austin's competitive real estate landscape. Her pharmaceutical job, once the bedrock of her financial stability, began to feel like a tedious distraction, a relic of a past life that was rapidly receding in her rearview mirror. The income from her burgeoning real estate portfolio quickly dwarfed her corporate salary, rendering it almost insignificant. Her colleagues spoke of her work ethic, unaware that her true focus lay elsewhere, in the hushed negotiations and rapid-fire transactions that were meticulously building her new future. The day she walked into her manager's office to tender her resignation was devoid of ceremony. Her words were calm, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. "My entrepreneurial ventures require my full attention," she stated, ignoring the surprised glances and perfunctory attempts to retain her. There was no grand exit, no burning of bridges, merely a quiet, definitive severance. She walked out of that building for the last time, not with a sense of relief, but with a sharpened focus, an almost tangible energy freed from the constraints of corporate life. Her financial independence was no longer an aspiration, it was an accomplished fact, a fortress fully provisioned and ready for further expansion. Weeks later, a gilded invitation arrived, Charlotte's wedding. The thick cardstock, embossed with intertwined initials, lay on Eleanor's polished marble countertop, a stark contrast to the blueprints and financial statements that usually dominated the space. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the elaborate script for a moment. There was no pang of nostalgia, no flicker of resentment, just a cool, objective assessment of its irrelevance. The family that had cast her aside, the sister who had gloated in her displacement, they were a distant echo now, their lives diverging so sharply from hers that any connection felt like a strained, impossible stretch. The invitation found its way into the recycling bin, unacknowledged, unanswered, a silent testament to the complete emotional detachment she had forged, leaving her free to focus entirely on the empire she was constructing, one perfectly calculated acquisition at a time. Weeks later, the inevitable call came. This time, it was Richard, his voice stronger, but laced with an undeniable tremor of desperation. He and Sarah requested a meeting, not at the hospital, but at a discreet cafe far from their usual haunts. The pretense of reconciliation had vanished, replaced by an urgent, almost frantic energy. They laid out their predicament with a chilling lack of self-awareness. Charlotte's lavish wedding, unexpected market downturns, and Richard's medical bills had decimated their savings. They were facing foreclosure. Their solution, delivered with an almost pathetic hope, was for Eleanor to buy their house. "We'll give you a good price," Darling, Sarah pleaded, a real family discount. It's the least you could do after everything. Richard chimed in, you're so successful, Eleanor. This would stabilize us. Keep the house in the family. Eleanor listened, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. The Westlake Hills mansion, the home they had always coveted, was back on the market, a recent listing she'd seen that very morning. Her parents' house, which they were offering her, held no appeal beyond its immediate proximity to their desperation. I appreciate the offer, she said, her voice smooth, unwavering. But I'm not interested in acquiring properties that come with emotional liabilities. My portfolio is strictly strategic. She watched their faces fall, the dawning realization of her absolute refusal hardening their features. However, she continued, standing, I noticed the Westlake Hills estate has been relisted. That I am interested in. She left them speechless, their faces contorted in a mixture of shock and dawning horror, their past dismissal now a tangible, bitter taste in the air. The mansion was no longer a symbol of their unattainable dream. It was about to become the ultimate declaration of her undeniable triumph. Driven by an unshakable resolve, Eleanor Vance set her sights on the Westlake Hills mansion. It was more than a house, it was the crucible of her ambition, a tangible monument to the life her parents had dangled just out of reach, now within her grasp. Leveraging her multi-million-dollar portfolio, a labyrinth of meticulously flipped properties and high-yield rentals, she approached her investment partners. There was no hesitation in her voice, only the sharp, clear articulation of a woman who knew her worth and the boundless potential of her empire. They listened, impressed by her meteoric rise and the undeniable data she presented, and promptly secured the significant financing required. Her offer for the mansion was audacious, pushing the boundaries of the market, a statement of intent as much as a financial proposal. The closing was swift, a mere formality for Eleanor. She signed the papers with a quiet, almost serene satisfaction, the pen gliding across the thick parchment, a physical manifestation of her triumph. The keys, heavy and cold in her palm, felt like the culmination of every late night, every shrewd negotiation, every calculated risk. This was not a victory lap, it was the planting of a flag on conquered territory, a definitive marker of her autonomy. The mansion, once a distant fantasy for the Vance family, was now indisputably hers, a fortress built not of stone and mortar, but of ambition and an unyielding will. Weeks later, the phone rang, an unfamiliar number. It was her mother, Sarah, her voice strained, bordering on desperation. Eleanor, we sold our house. It was less than we hoped. We're in between places. Do you think we could, just for a few nights? Eleanor's response was curt, devoid of emotion. You sold your house. I sold mine years ago. She gave them an address, careful to omit any details that might prepare them for the scale of her new life. A perverse sense of anticipation coiled in her gut. She knew they would come, driven by necessity, perhaps a flicker of hope that the daughter they discarded might still offer succor. They arrived in a beat-up rental car, Richard, grim-faced and stooped, and Sarah, pale and anxious. The automatic gates of the Westlake Hills estate swung open with a silent, opulent sigh, revealing a winding drive flanked by manicured gardens and ancient oaks. Their eyes widened, their expressions shifting from weary resignation to a dawning, horrified comprehension. Eleanor, what is this place? Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. As they rounded the final bend, the sprawling, Mediterranean-style mansion, with its terracotta roof and sun-drenched facade, rose before them, an architectural marvel of wealth and taste. It dwarfed their former home, making it seem a cottage by comparison. Eleanor stood on the marble steps, a picture of effortless elegance in a silk pantsuit, a quiet smile playing on her lips. Welcome, she said, her voice calm, devoid of triumph, yet cutting deeper than any angry outburst. This is my home. The one you always admired, remember? Your dream home. Richard's jaw dropped, his face paling, the color draining from his cheeks as if he'd seen a ghost. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes, not of joy, but of a shattering humiliation that mirrored her husband's. They stared at her, then at the house, then back at her, their minds struggling to reconcile the scorned daughter with the formidable woman who stood before them, the architect of this impossible reality. "I built this," Eleanor continued, her gaze unwavering, brick by brick, deal by deal. "Every late night, every risk, every dollar earned was a testament to the fact that you underestimated me. You didn't just ask me to move out, you pushed me into my destiny. You dismissed my contributions, belittled my ambition, and believed I was nothing without your approval. But you were wrong. You were so spectacularly wrong." The words were delivered with a surgical precision, each one a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing their fragile egos, revealing the hollowness of their past judgments. Their faces were a canvas of shock, shame, and a burgeoning terror at the sheer scale of the empire they had inadvertently forged. Just then, a sleek, black car pulled into the drive. Charlotte, looking flustered and irritated, emerged, her eyes scanning the opulent surroundings before landing on Eleanor, then her parents. "What is going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Her gaze finally settled on the mansion, and a flicker of recognition, then pure, unadulterated envy, contorted her features. "Eleanor? This is your house? How could you? After everything you put us through, you just disappear and buy this?" Her accusation hung in the air, a bitter, futile cry against the irrefutable evidence of Eleanor's colossal success, her self-made power. Months turned into a year. Through hushed whispers from distant relatives and the infrequent, pained updates from her former colleagues, Eleanor occasionally caught glimpses of the Vance family's declining fortunes. Richard and Sarah had indeed sold their family home, not at the expected premium, but under duress, for a fraction of what they had hoped. Their once comfortable lives had become a constant struggle against mounting bills and dwindling assets. And then came the news that, with nowhere else to turn, Charlotte, the pampered, the privileged, had returned to live under her parents' roof, a bitter irony given the very situation Eleanor had been cast out for refusing. Eleanor felt no flicker of guilt, no twinge of regret, only a profound sense of peace. The vindication was complete, quiet, and deeply satisfying. She had built her own empire, brick by meticulously placed brick, and in doing so, had carved out a life of absolute autonomy, forever free from the shackles of their shallow expectations and devastating dismissal. In her magnificent Westlake Hills mansion, the architect of her own destiny found her truest, most powerful self.